Okay, so we're talking specifically about data ethics, one of the four fundamental areas of the ethics of artificial intelligence, and we're talking about privacy. So the problem of anonymization, well, we'll just look at our familiar 6-question framework, trying to figure out what's going on here, what is the problem, what's familiar about the problem, what's new about it, and the ethical values and solutions. Okay, so what is the problem? The problem starts with this. Data has value. What kind of value for who? Lots of kinds for lots of people. That's why there's degrees in statistics and in analytics, and there's just lots of things that we can know from data. Okay, so that's on the one hand. On the other hand, sometimes examining the data ends up violating someone's privacy. We end up knowing something or publicizing something that was supposed to be private. Okay, so that's old news. What do we do about it? Well, by far, the most important strategy for dealing with it is anonymization, right? So when you want value from the data, but there's parts of the data that you don't want anybody to know, or you don't want to find out, you anonymize that, you cover it up, so no one can see it, and it's supposed to be that you can't link the valuable stuff that you want to analyze to the sensitive stuff. Okay. In the analog world, that actually worked pretty well, and in other contexts in the digital world, that works okay too. But there's actually a saying out there: anonymized data isn't. That is to say, you think you've taken the proper steps to anonymize the data, and then bam, 2 seconds later, someone re-identifies or de-anonymizes the data. You didn't think it was possible, but it wasn't really that hard. That's the kind of thing that happens all the time. All right, so what's familiar about this problem? Well, we have always had the challenge of discriminating between sensitive and non-sensitive data. How do you tell the difference? Because you want to be able to not to cover up the sensitive parts and to leave open the non-sensitive parts. Okay, so we have frameworks to do that. Most common is personally identifiable information. There's some systems and procedures to understand like what of those parts we can cover up and what we don't need to. Okay, but there's a couple things to worry about here. So what's new about this problem just because of the scale of digital technology? Well, there's a quantitative and a qualitative issue here. So the quantitative issue, I mean, these both have to do with your data trail. So we're familiar with this concept of me leaving a data trail. But the kind of thing that both in terms of quantity and in quality that counts as a data trail is exploded so exponentially in just the last few years, the last couple decades, that, I mean, it's just mind-boggling, okay? So, you know, the easiest thing to talk about is the supercomputer that everyone's carrying around in their pocket now, your smartphone. Before the age of smartphones, there's, you know, just not a lot of data about people. Now anything you do, your movements, your communication, how you entertain yourself, the information that you're getting, the interactions, the music, like all that stuff is data. And because it's digital data, it's not like, you know, it's stored automatically. It's not like some person who's surveilling you is like, oh, this is very interesting what you did on Thursday. I'm going to write this down and put this in the cloud. No, this is just automatically, all this data about you is just dumped into the cloud. And because it's stored in ones and zeros, it's not clear how it ever degrades. I mean, you know, there's certain circumstances where that happens, but it's essentially it's there forever, right? Both of those things are very much unlike analog data. And there's a qualitative issue too, right? So you think about data, the first thing that comes in your mind is numbers and names, and that stuff is data, but there's so many other things that count as data. Your face is a face print, it's data. Your walk, your gait is actually fairly unique to you. It can identify you. There's so many things that count as data that didn't count as data before. So the end result is that, like, if you're trying to just like wrap your mind around your digital trail and to kind of clean it up and just, you know, like, keep the stuff anonymous. That's a very, very difficult battle. I don't, there's things that you can and should do, but just trying to be comprehensive about it and make sure that nothing gets out that you don't want to get out is that's a tough one. Okay, what about, it gets even worse, unfortunately. That's just about the scale of digital technology. What about what's new because of the capabilities of digital technology? Well, there is a way to think about it where it's like if you do have just a single data set, you can kind of think about, okay, so what are the sensitive features and what are the non-sensitive features, and then cover up the sensitive ones, and you say, okay, this data set is now properly anonymized. And you might be right about that. The problem is that there's data from everywhere. There's so many different kinds of data sets out there. And a lot of times in the context of a single data set, when you properly anonymize it, it can become unanonymized when it's aggregated with other data, right? So now that, if your name was covered up here and your social was covered up here, but then it's combined with 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 other data sets, now it's like linked to you, and there's other things that your name could be revealed then. And it's not like rare that data sets are aggregated. In fact, there's an entire industry of professionals, companies just devoted to aggregating data. I mean, mostly in the context of selling it for marketing purposes, but it's a big industry with lots of fingerprints all over the place. Okay, so that's I think one way to think about how difficult it is to guarantee to someone that their anonymized data will never become they'll never be re-identified through it, or never be de-anonymized. Okay, we always bring it back to ethics to think about what ethical value we're talking about here. I mean, the title of this list is privacy, so we're talking about privacy, so that's not a tough one. But just as a reminder, we're doing it for the sake of autonomy, right? The formula is that the less whoever they is, big companies, the government, whoever, the less that they know about me, the easier it is for me to live my own life in my own way. The more that they know about me, the easier it is for them to coerce or manipulate me. And so the privacy is clearly the best way to prevent systems, government, other people from knowing things about you that you don't want them to know. But that is, I mean, you can value privacy for its own sake, but it's usually done for the sake of autonomy. What are some potential solutions? Okay, in another video, I talked about the what of privacy, what it is, why it's important, when it's important. I'll add another cute little question to that list. How? How do we get it? So that's what I want to talk about now. So there's different kinds of privacy preserving techniques, right? As I talked about anonymization as the one that has been the most effective historically in the age of analog data. It's not so much now. There are other ways that people are thinking about that can preserve privacy that doesn't rely on anonymization. I'll talk about the one that I know the most about. It's not the only one out there, but it's called differential privacy. So the differential privacy, the heart of it, is it kind of does the opposite of anonymization, okay? So anonymization, think about it as like a process of taking things away. It's like you want to cover this up, you want to take this out of the data set, you don't want people to know this, and so it's missing, it's gone from the data set, okay? The problem is, as we were discussing, it can be, you can be re-identified, anonymized data isn't, right? Well, in differential privacy, it takes the opposite approach. Instead of taking something away from the data, it's adding something, noise. Now, that sounds a little surprising because you might think, well, wait a minute, we don't want to add noise to the data. Noise is bad when in the context of data. Yeah, but if you add noise and you know which kind of noise you're adding and how much it is, you can still extract a lot of information on the other side. You can still analyze the data, knowing how much noise you put into the system, and still get meaningful answers, right? But this oftentimes can't be tied back to particular individuals. So that's an example. There are other privacy-preserving techniques. I think that's a particularly exciting one to think about. But as we go beyond anonymization, that's the kind of thing that we're going to need to figure out.